must have the precious.
George Bailey, I'll love you till the day I die.
I volunteer as tribute!
Hey, thought you could leave without saying goodbye.
I used to say I live my life a quarter mile at a time. And I think that's why we were brothers. Because you did too.
I can jog all the way to Texas and back, but my daughter can't. She never could. Oh, God, I'm so mad I don't know what to do.
I could not have parted with you, my Lizzie, to anyone less worthy.
You is smart, you is kind, you is important. Oh, that's so good.
Do you love me?
Do I love you?
Well,
That day she was amazed to discover that when he was saying as you wish, what he meant was, I love you.
You complete me. And I just had...
Shut up. Just shut up. You had me at hello.
Your mother is my home.
No, Groot! You can't. You'll die. Why are you doing this? Why?
we are Groot.
I see you.
I know your name, but this does not define you. This is not who you are. You know who you are.
Good morning. So, for those of you who I haven't had the chance to meet yet, I'm Shannon. I'm the Director of Youth and Family here. And I put together that little clip for us today to get us in the mindset of what is love? Because to me, stories, they move us. They connect us to others, they open us up to other worlds, they ignite our imagination, engage us, and can make us think. And I truly love watching movies. So how do I bring myself to this was sharing a little bit of me. But movies, I think, can help us point towards God's larger story. And when I was reading through the passages, that word kept popping up, right? We've heard it in Sandy's children's message, love. But I'm a good Lutheran church nerd, so I asked the question, what does this mean? Because in our world, I can say I love tacos, I love my bestie, or I love God, and it's all the same word. But in Greek, which is what these passages were written in, there's many different words, like storge, which means family love, or eros, the Valentine's Day sweetie love, or philia, that bestie friendship love, or agape, that godly love. There's lots more, but those are the four main ones that we hear about. And as I looked at the Greek for these passages, I was like, all right, I'm ready to take note. Which ones are which, and how are we going to do this? And every single time, which there's over 32 times that it says it, every time it was some form of agape. So I was like, okay, now I need to re-look at this, because what does that really mean? In 1 John 4:7, in another translation, it says, "Beloved, let us love one another." And I was struck by that word, beloved. Dear friends, in other translations. But in our worlds, we don't really call people beloved. And a lot of young people, and I do generalize here, are surrounded in this culture of us versus them. A culture that says our worth comes from outside beauty, or how much we're willing to share of ourselves. of how good we are at sports, music, our skill set. Culture that says we have to pick a side. The culture that says it's better to be busy and surrounded by people than to take time for ourselves and to be alone. Culture that says we have to hide our scars and our pain. But yet, I see communities that are trying to change that culture. Adults that try to step in and create safe spaces. Youth who take a stand with protests and walkouts. I hear songs on the radio that remind us that we're all beautiful in our own way. But the youth are still living in a world where they regularly have to practice active shooter drills at school, where suicide, anxiety, and depression aren't just words that they've heard, but they've lived through or through the fallout of, where busyness fills their schedule and they've forgotten how to be kids. And over I'm reminded that the world tells us that we're not enough. So we put on our masks. And maybe your mask is working so that you don't have to admit how alone you are at home. Perhaps it's being cheerful and optimistic when inside you really just want to cry. Every one of us has a mask. But agape, it sees through the masks to our actual selves. A couple of weeks ago, we hosted the live stream of the ELCA youth gathering that was held in Houston, Texas, where over 31,000 high schoolers and their adult leaders spent the week immersed in what does it mean that this changes everything. And just a quick shout out to Sarah, Lou, Dwayne, Ruth, Mike, Randy, Rochelle, Steve, who showed up and loved on the kids who showed up and helped make that possible. Because on day 2, the theme was God's love changes everything. And that night, Marlon Hall was the speaker, and he said so much, and it was just so powerful to hear him talk. But the one thing that I thought really connected to this passage was, he said this: "You were born to make an indelible mark on this world that no one can erase. And if you don't make that mark won't be made. You make that mark by living God's love in the world." It's pretty powerful to know that we are that unique. But what does that look like, to live God's love in the world? And 1 John says, in this world we are like Jesus. But what does that really mean? We can scour the Bible and we can look at all the different stories that we can find of Jesus. We'll see of the earthly family that Jesus was born into. Jesus' yearning for knowledge and digging into the scriptures with the elders when he was a child. Stories of him understanding his call and vocation in the world. Of being a leader and teacher and the struggles that came with that. Of spending time with his friends. Of recognizing and walking alongside of the ones who are marginalized from society, the ones who had no place. Of simple moments, of one-on-one times, and of grandiose moments where he's with thousands. But love was always at the center, and it was his courage to follow through on what he was called to do and to challenge society that all people were to be treated with respect and dignity. There's a song on K-Love that I've heard repeatedly this week by Jason Gray, and he says it almost as a prayer, that with every act of love, Jesus, help us carry you alive in us, because your light shines through. See, we're all capable of letting our light shine. We hear that in the baptismal covenant. And when we let that shine through, God's light amplifies our own. And agape is living out that light, shining our light in the world. Then again in 1 John we hear there is no fear in love. And depending on the translation that you're looking at, there's close to 500 times throughout the Bible that we hear it talk about fear. And we're told that the one who fears is not made perfect in love, or that we're not complete. Because earlier in the passage, John says that if we love one another, then God's love is complete in us. So there's this fear that can hold us back from being complete. One of the scenes in that first clip was from the Fast and the Furious movies. It's one of my favorite. It started when I was in high school, and my brother and I would just soak up, and we were so excited when the next one would come out. And because there's so many of them, like 8 or 9 movies, and the characters have stayed the same, you get to kind of develop a relationship where you get to know them and see them grow. And for some of them, they were so fearless in the things that they would do, jumping cars, driving underneath trucks. But when they could act with no fear, you could see that sometimes they were very fearful when it came to opening themselves and to sharing that love that they had. And so I don't think that John is telling us that we can't have fear, because that's something that we don't really control, right? You can't control what you're fearful of, but we can control whether we let that fear in or if we can take a leap of faith and act in spite of our fear. So what are you fearful of? What is the fear that keeps you from that perfect agape love? Because God continues to ask us to take a leap of faith, and even when we fail, He continues to love us, and we are called to try again. Because agape is being courageous. And then it goes on to the next verses to say, whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. And I was struggling with this. But then I thought of the movie Avatar. And in that movie, they didn't really ever say, I love you. Instead, they would say, I see you. So I looked into that a little bit and found that it came from a South African Zulu tribe greeting, where the people in that tribe would look each other into the eyes and say, I am here to be seen. And the person would respond, I see you. When we truly let ourselves be seen, when we let the masks fall down, or when we offer somebody that ability to let their masks come down and give them a safe place, there's vulnerability and trust that is cultivated. There's a program called Pure Ministry that I've been lucky enough to experience through a few different areas. But a few years ago, that's what some of those pictures are from, the youth were encouraged to find partners and practice active listening. So they would go off one-on-one, or they would practice listening in the center of a large circle, and to just have an experience where they were truly heard, which isn't something that's normal, right? How are you? I'm fine. Great. Keep walking. But we spent 2 full days. What does it mean to really say, how are you? I'm not okay. Oh, and stop and listen. That picture in the top corner were kids who had never met before that retreat. But because they had taken that time to really see each other, they formed relationships that couldn't be changed and couldn't be broken. And years later, I still see them on social media connecting because they're not in the same church. There's a place when that's cultivated, it becomes a place where you can share the burdens that you're carrying. And if we truly see a friend, a brother or sister, we see who they are, and we help carry that burden. In the clip of Moana, when we agape, we see beyond those burned exteriors. We're not afraid, and we remind them of who they are, and we help them define their actual selves. So when have you allowed someone to see that part of you? Or when have you been trusted with that part of someone else? When we have broken hearts, we might confuse hurt, anger, sadness, or despair for hate. But when you truly love someone, there's a deepness that hate can't bridge. And C.S. Lewis tells us that if you love anything, your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. You want to make sure of keeping it intact. Give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully around with hobbies and luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe, but then it will become In that safe, dark, motionless, airless place, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, and irredeemable, because to love is to be vulnerable. So agape is vulnerability. But there's hope, because John tells us that all of this is for a purpose. And that purpose is so that God's joy can be in us and that our joy may be complete. And it seems that this deep joy that we're striving for comes from living out that deep agape for others the way that God agapes us. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. Nadia Boltz-Weber also spoke at the gathering. And she said that when we talk about things like love, grace, mercy, forgiveness, it's a double-edged sword. It can push us where we don't want to go. It takes us out of our comfort zone. Because when I can accept that grace and love and mercy are true for me, that's great. It's for the people that I see, the people that I like, the people that are my same color in the M&M bag. But God's all is all of them that are in the M&M bag. The ones who have hurt me, the ones that I disagree with, the ones who are on different paths than I am. It's every human, every child of God. Sandy had us pray together that we would try to live out that love, which I think goes back to John 13, which says that we will be known as Christians by our love. So I ask you, how will you show that this week? On the way to church this morning, I heard the song Dream Small by Josh Wilson. And it says, "Don't bother like you've got to do it all. Just let Jesus use you where you are." So is it by donating an action team so that the kids can help out at VBS and do projects? Is it bringing things to fill the canoe? Is it bringing things for the emergency refugees so that we could put these kits together? Is it giving of your time? Is it visiting someone who's sick or shut in or hasn't been able to come to church? Is it texting a friend to let them know that you're thinking of them? What is the dream small that you can do to show that agape this week? It's hard. Agape sees through the masks. It pushes us. It asks for courage, and it forces us to a place of vulnerability. So I leave you with this. It's from A League of Their Own. It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great.